Good evening. Good evening. Welcome, community members, legislators, family, and friends. I am Kim Collins. I hold the office of Second Vice President, and I am a member of the Connection and Social Action Committee of Alpha Alpha Tau Omega Chapter. Alpha Alpha Tau Omega Chapter is a part of the larger network of professional women who are members of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority is the first Black sorority founded in 1908 on the campus of Howard University. We have over 330,000 women spread worldwide. We welcome you this evening to our legislative forum focused on mental health initiatives. At this time, I would like to introduce Mrs. Dina White Griffin. Mrs. Griffin is a 36-year member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. She was initiated on the campus of Temple University. Mrs. Griffin is the Assistant Regional Counsel for the Office of General Counsel, Social Security Administration, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. At all times, she demonstrates her willingness to help others and serve her community. Mrs. Griffin is the first president of Alpha Alpha Tau Omega Chapter. In fact, the theme for her administration is first, forging, inspiring, realizing service together. Without further ado, here to bring you greetings is Mrs. Dina White Griffin.
Good evening. My name is Dina White Griffin, president of Alpha Alpha Tau Omega Chapter of the Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, serving Middletown, Odessa, and Townsend, Delaware, and Southern Newcastle County. We are so happy that you have joined us this evening. Since May 16th, 2021, our chapter, as you've heard, has been operating under the theme AATO First, Alpha Alpha Tau Omega, Forging, Inspiring, Realizing Service Together. And this week, we have been delighted to bring to you AATO Week, a celebration of service, which commemorates the one-year chapter anniversary. Tonight, we continue our focus on mental health awareness. Most would agree that a multi-pronged approach is needed for dealing with mental health issues. The first approach is prevention. And on Monday, AATO offered de-stress events for the youngest in our community and to our senior citizens, For we know if left unaddressed, stress can lead to depression and anxiety. The second approach is intervention. On Monday evening, AATO presented a forum to transform the way people think about mental health, particularly our communities of color, removing the stigma, reminding us that it's okay to say that you're not okay, to look within and encouraging conversations with those around us, and offering vital resources for support. We want to celebrate and appreciate those who seek help to overcome their challenges. And so tonight we bring you the third prong, legislation. Under the International Connection and Social Action theme, AKA's lead, members of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated learn, empower, advocate, and decide on legislative, public policy, and social justice issues critical to Black women and the African American community. On behalf of the 47 members of Alpha Alpha Tau Omega Chapter, thank you for joining us. And we hope that you will join us as we support legislation on mental health. It is a very serious matter, for we know there is no health without mental health. We appreciate your support of what we call the Friends of AATO, including our sorority leadership, some who have joined us this evening. I'd like to recognize Yatana Walker, the president of Alpha Alpha Sigma Omega Chapter. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mrs. Griffin. It is now time for me to introduce our moderator for the evening, Mrs. Lakresha Moultrie. Mrs. Moultrie currently serves as Vice President of Legal Affairs, General Counsel, and Chief Enterprise Risk Officer at Delaware State University, one of America's leading historically Black colleges and universities. Mrs. Moultrie received her law degree from Delaware Law School of Widener University and her undergraduate degree, magna cum laude, from Pace University. In November 2021, Mrs. Moultrie was named one of the 40 most influential women in business in Delaware by Delaware Today magazine. Mrs. Moultrie takes great pride in her family She and her husband Sam live in Hockessin with their children Mackenzie and Maximus. Mrs. Moultrie, the floor, or rather the Zoom, is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So good evening, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here with you today. On behalf of Alpha Alpha Tau Omega, I welcome you to our legislative forum this evening. We are excited to have Senators Poore and Pinkey join us today to discuss their advocacy related to mental and behavioral health services for Delawareans. This evening, each senator will discuss their recent initiatives, and their presentations will be followed by an opportunity for our audience to participate by asking questions. Please be sure to use the chat for that function. Now we will begin with an introduction of Senator Nicole Poore. Senator Poore, welcome. Senator Nicole Poore represents the 12th Senate District, which includes most of Newcastle and Bear, all of Delaware City, and communities that are south of the Chesapeake and the Delaware Canal, including Whitehall, Bayberry, and others. Raised in Newcastle's Jefferson Farms community, Senator Poore graduated from St. Elizabeth's High School in 1990 and later earned her associate's degree in criminal justice from Delaware Technical Community College and a bachelor's degree in criminal justice from Wilmington University. Senator Poore brings to the General Assembly a strong business background with over 18 years of experience in healthcare. She joined her brother in building a successful healthcare staffing startup that was later sold to Welsh Carson, one of the largest investment firms in the United States. Senator Poore would then become a senior client services manager for Agile One, where she handled workforce solutions for DuPont Company. Senator Poore decided to leave the business world to pursue work in the nonprofit arena. Senator Poore's interest in government policy began after the birth of her oldest son, Nicholas, who was diagnosed with cerebral palsy. Her activism in the special needs community led to her successful 2012 bid for state senate. Senator Poore currently chairs the Joint Capital Improvement Committee and serves as vice chair of both the Senate Health and Social Services Committee and the Senate Labor Committee. With Senator Poore's many years of business and public sector experience, we are very pleased to have us join our forum today. Good evening, Senator.
Good evening.
So I'll start with just a couple of questions for you. During the pandemic, beyond the statistics that we all heard about viral spread and deaths, there was also a very robust discussion around mental and behavioral health. That was a priority amongst Delawareans. Would you please tell us about some of your work that focused on behavioral health during the pandemic?
Sure, absolutely. Good evening, ladies. So great to be first invited to this meeting. I want to thank Dr. Debbie Harrington, who's a part of my RD, who included me in this evening. So thank you so much. Lakresha, thank you so much also for spending some time with me last week and having the conversation about this. This is such an important conversation. I don't care how old you are. It is absolutely needed. And we need to get comfortable with this conversation. We have to remove the stigma of needing help, asking for help, and getting help. So I will try to condense this as much as possible. So when we started with the pandemic, it was tragic, not only for people who aren't in government, but it was equally tragic for us. I have 3 children. My son, who has special needs, no longer was able to go out in the community. And so we're still trying to integrate him back into the community, even after all this time. My middle child was a sophomore in college. So you can imagine your mom showing up to college and all of a sudden, you know, things are not good. And so she cried. And I said to her, Lex, I'm sorry, within 24 hours, the world is going to explode and I need to get you home. I have to get you home. And then my youngest, who was a freshman in high school, it was devastating. So that being said, conversations that were taking place directly involved some of our young kids. And what was happening is the story that I was told was that we had a 14-year-old young lady who was handcuffed in a hospital bed at Nemours. And I have to tell you, that is absolutely unacceptable. Unacceptable. And so our nursing staff was spending more than 10 hours in that shift trying to find a placement for this young girl. So that led me to asking questions about our hospital system, especially for our youth. For all the ladies on the call, whether you're a mom, you're an aunt, you're a sister, you're a grandmother, whatever the conditions, the situation may be, can I just say to you, when our kids are hurt, we take them to the ER. If they need stitches, we take them to the ER. If they break a finger, we take them to the ER. If our child is having a crisis, where are we going to go? We're going to the ER. Get me that specialist. Tell me who can help me figure out what's wrong with my child. And so to find that there were only 2 psych beds in Nemours Hospital in the ER, I was stunned. And so that started me having conversations with Nemours in regards to creating a unit inside their hospital. If we're treating acute care patients for chronic illnesses, for cardiac issues, then we need to look a little bit deeper to make sure that we're treating that child holistically. We're going inside and out to be able to get this child to where they need to be. So long story short, every Thursday I was meeting with Nemours and we were having these conversations. The statistics that I knew, that from January to May, over 104 children had been admitted into Nemours behavioral health issues. That should be staggering. That was just the beginning of the pandemic. And so those conversations took place over and over. Then they had a change of administration. It really left us struggling what was going to happen. And so our conversations stopped. And the new CEO came in. I learned that he was a CEO of Cincinnati Children's Hospital, 138 bed mental health facility. And you come to little old Delaware and we're not making mental health a priority. I'm so fortunate that I get to work with my colleague, Senator Marie Pinkey, who was the main sponsor for House Bill 100 and making sure that we have counselors in our schools. And so, you know, these are the things that we're doing. If we're putting counselors in our schools, that means our hospitals are also going to get filled. Because I can guarantee you, if a child's in crisis, that counselor is calling our kids department, they're calling 911. We're getting our kids into Nemours. And so therefore, just for that reason alone, they have to be prepared for us. Our kids are now acclimating back into school. The stresses are higher. Social media is a nightmare, right? And I have to say I'm the worst one, because when I can't sleep, I'm TikToking quite a bit. And so I know you all are TikToking too. I see a lot of people laughing. But the reality is that, you know, it's a tool, and this tool is really affecting our children. So anyway, long story short, I was just told a few weeks ago that Nemours is moving forward with a 25-bed unit in their hospital. And again, I am relieved. I tried not to make it a political push. I wanted to have real conversations. I spent almost 20 years in the healthcare industry. And so I know that they already saw the crisis that Delaware was in, and they just needed a little bit of help to get them motivated to doing this. So I'm looking forward to their build out. We've had some amazing conversations, and that's just one piece of it. My other senator, Sarah McBride, she did an outstanding job in our health committee. And when I went to her and said, hey, listen, as chair of health, we've got to do some more things. She actually did a forum and brought all of the hospital systems and our facilities in Delaware to talk about what they're doing in the state of Delaware regarding mental health. And one of the issues that we found is one of the facilities was not taking patients if they had state insurance. And they said, because it was an issue with Highmark. And you couldn't tell us that. You couldn't call us to tell us so we could fix it. Well, it's fixed today. And now we're able to make sure that anybody who needs services under state insurance are able to get that. So our goal is, or at least I don't want to speak for Senator Pinkney, but I think I'm okay in saying this. Our goal is to make sure that we provide the supports that each and every Delawarean needs to make sure that they get the help that they need.
That is excellent work. And thank you for your advocacy. We're obviously very excited to hear about the 25 bed unit coming to Nemours. Part of what you talked about is a little different than what we often hear. So as a legislator, I think there at times we can default to thinking that it always takes legislation to get the job done. But the example that you just gave really kind of reminded me of what we refer to as the Delaware way. Leveraging the fact that we're a small state and we have relationships and keeping open lines of communication as a very useful tool in getting the job done. Have you found that that's been effective in your years at the General Assembly?
I do. I think this is, I think you'll all laugh at this. So I tell people all the time, I know a little bit about a lot. And so here's the situation. If you leave it up to me, I could possibly destroy your whole profession. And I'm sure you don't want me to do that. And so, but if I bring us all together and we have the conversation, believe it or not, when we sit down at the table, whether we fight, and that's what I love about Delaware, right? We can fight and still see each other at the supermarket or at the gym, at a meeting, and we're okay. And what happens is once we get past whatever that difficulty is, then we come together and we find the right solution. So I try not to result in necessarily legislation all the time. Sometimes it could be a resolution to acknowledge a particular issue. Other times it can be the fact that we're going to sit down and have this conversation. And when you have the people sitting at the table, then what happens is they go, oh my goodness, I can do this. We just need to change our regulations. We just need to add a simple comment to something else. And then when push comes to shove, maybe it's because we need to increase fees or we need to make some tighter, we will need to close some loopholes. Then legislation becomes a part of it. But, you know, I've made some really great friends by doing introductions and sitting down at the table and really ironing things out. And I think that we can do it a lot of different ways. I mean, truth be told, you're going to find me, like I said, at the gym. Sometimes I can talk Marie into it. Or you're going to find us at the supermarket. And that's what's so awesome about Delaware is that, you know, you're going to see us around for sure.
Excellent. So in recent years, Delawareans have focused on the importance of police training,
Yes.
specifically around managing crisis situations involving individuals who may have mental health diagnoses. Can you tell us about your work with Senator Longhurst in establishing a task force to deal with that very issue?
Yeah, absolutely. So Representative Longhurst, who happens to be one of my reps, really has been a champion for mental health. And, you know, and like I said, she has partnerships with Senator Pinkney, and they have just done some outstanding work, as well as with Senator McBride. I mean, I would say collectively, all of us get that this is a national crisis and Delaware is not going to be excluded from that. So one of the things that we talked about is that when someone's in crisis, we don't want necessarily the police showing up and they think that they've done something wrong. They haven't done anything wrong. Whatever's happening internally, whatever that breakdown is they need the supports. So Representative Longhurst made sure that there was funding put into place that assisted Newcastle County Police. So there are social workers that actually go out to people's homes with the police. In the event that a situation is starting to escalate, the police are there, but they're in the background. And so the social workers and the people that are participating through Newcastle County Police are outstanding. That unit has been just, it's priceless. And so now what's happening is it's being mirrored in other municipalities throughout the state. And then the state police is also adding some additional staff. I think that this is a credit to us hearing and seeing what our neighbors need in the state of Delaware. But more importantly, I want us to really focus on when the police are called and they are coming out. we don't want our loved ones being handcuffed. We don't want them shoved in the back of a patrol car. When they have to leave from one environment to another, we also we want to provide safe services for them. And so this is something that we're working through in the task force. So I'm going to encourage everyone, we're going to be meeting again. We did a whole mapping about 4 weeks ago that took us 3 hours, and we still haven't really dug down to some of the core things that need to change, but we at least have a good platform of where we're going to start. And so we're going to be hosting another meeting, I believe in the next week at Del Tech. We'll finish that meeting there. So I encourage any one of you to join us, or if you have any questions, or if you even have any feedback, please share it with us.
Excellent. And you mentioned that this model is being mirrored throughout the state. Is there going to be any data collected so that at some point there can be some measurement of the effectiveness of having social workers on the scene?
Absolutely. And can I just tell you, we already have the data. I'm sorry that I don't have it in front of me right now. But what I can tell you is that it is positive because it is being mirrored throughout the state. And we need to, part of when I went to school a long time ago, sadly enough, when I was in criminal justice, and I share this all the time, one of my best professors said, a police officer is meant to be a peace officer, to bring peace to a community. And that's what we need to look for, right? So if a police officer is being called out, especially in a mental health situation, we need peace, we need calm, we need to de-escalate, we need to figure out, we need to give the police officers the tools. When you put a social worker in front of a police officer, guess what? You don't see that police officer. It's kind of like a person with disabilities. When you put a pet in front of the person with disabilities, they don't see the person with disabilities. They see the pet and then the person. And so we want to try and follow that same model.
Very nice. And I appreciate how you sort of package this message so concisely. Have you found that the public and law enforcement and healthcare have been really receptive to this movement by the General Assembly?
Yeah, I think that not one of us can say that we haven't had a moment in our life that we had to reflect, maybe think about help, get help, go see a doctor. I mean, I can go down the list of things, or we've encouraged from one girlfriend to another, hey, you need some help. And so I would say to you that, this has been well received, although there are stigmas attached to it. And if we continue to talk about it, like tonight's forum, we're going to continue to talk about it. And you know what, for those of you that are not comfortable with this conversation, please get comfortable. And we'll keep talking about it, because you know what they say, you say it 3 times and then all of a sudden it just kind of starts happening. So we're going to keep saying it, that mental health, it is a disease. It may happen at any point in your life. My goodness, I've had 3 kids. My last one was 9'4". He could have definitely that I'm kind of tiny. So 9'4", he took up most of my body parts. So, you come out of having a baby, there's so many things that could trigger that moment in your life that basically is the moment that says, hey, I need a little bit of help, and that's okay. So we need to get comfortable with it. We need to know it's okay. And we need to make sure we put the tools out there for people to be able to utilize.
Very true. Thank you for sharing those personal stories. So next, I am going to introduce Senator Pinkey. Good evening, Senator. Senator Pinkey represents the 13th District, which stretches from the Christiana River South to Red Lion Road and encompasses dozens of neighborhoods along Route 13. The senator graduated from Howard High School of Technology. She earned her bachelor's degree in social work from Norfolk State University and a master's degree in social work from Delaware State University. Her work history is remarkable, including working at a treatment center for adolescents with mental health and substance abuse issues after graduate school. And she currently works as a social worker and case manager at Christiana Care. The senator has dedicated her career to advocating alongside families seeking quality health care, access to resources, educational support, and government policies that support them. Senator Pinkney became the first African-American LGBTQ+ person ever elected to the Delaware Senate in 2020. The senator wasted no time settling into Legislative Hall, already assuming a leadership role as chair of the Corrections and Public Safety Committee. So I hope you will all join me in welcoming the senator to our discussion today. So Senator, earlier, Senator Poore mentioned House Bill 100. I know that you have been very active in the General Assembly down at Leg Hall. Given your background working in particular with adolescents, you focused on advocating for services for elementary and middle school students for mental health services in Delaware. Can you tell us a little bit more about that legislation?
Absolutely, and hello and good evening to everyone. Thank you to the ladies of Alpha Alpha Tau Omega Chapter Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated for having me this evening. It is a pleasure and an honor to join you, particularly for a topic that is one of my favorites to discuss, mental health. And so you asked about HB 100 and 300 and why we focused on adolescents and our young people. So it was an honor to be asked by Representative Longhurst to be the Senate Prime of both of these bills. As you mentioned, Lakresha, my early career was spent in adolescent mental health and substance abuse, which was probably one of the most rewarding jobs I've ever had. And I'd probably still be there if I wasn't making only $17 an hour with $100,000 worth of student loan debt. But that was probably one of the most eye-opening experiences that I had, because when I worked there, I was a family therapist. So I didn't just work with the teens. I got to work with their whole families. And so you can really see how mental health and substance abuse problems, when they resonate in one person, can impact an entire family. And so working with the teens and helping them to kind of work through their issues also created change in entire family systems. And so that out of that, a philosophy of mine was born, that if we can target mental health and substance abuse problems in a young person, we can change the trajectory of their lives and their families' lives. And I believe, and Representative Longhurst believes, that the earlier that we can work on these behaviors, especially if we're working with our babies in elementary school, if we can teach them coping skills, if we can teach them to, one of my sayings when I worked with kids was to blow a bubble and smell the roses, right? If we can teach kids how to do that early and how to calm themselves down and learn coping skills early, they will carry those coping skills throughout the rest of their lives. Those coping skills will be developed throughout the rest of their lives. And so blowing a bubble and smelling the roses will turn into taking a 15-minute walk when you want to get into a fight or when someone is upsetting you. It will turn into journaling. My colleague, Senator Poore, mentioned the gym. I'm an avid gym person, but she knows I'm not going to high-low class with her. That's just where I draw the line. But I do Kung Fu. So for me, when I'm getting upset, I might want to go hit some Kung Fu moves. And so if we can teach kids at a very early age the importance of recognizing what works for them and how to utilize that, they can then take those skills throughout the rest of their lives. They can go home and hold their parents accountable for learning coping skills. They can tell their parents to blow a bubble and to smell the roses. And so that's why we started with our youngest one. So we started with HB 100 last year that we were able to successfully pass and was signed into law by the governor. And we came back this year, we did HB 300, which was passed out of committee in the House and will be going to the House floor before it comes over to me in the Senate.
Excellent. And with that sort of legislation, really starting out advocating for mental health services at a young age, what do you see that growing into? Where do you go from there once you take a look back and say, all right, we've got those services there. What do you see as the next step for supporting adolescents in their mental health issues?
That is a really, really wonderful question. So one of the things that a good number of schools have, but I think we need to continue to grow, are our school wellness centers, where a lot of these services are rendered through. So HB 100 and 300 were really, really amazing because they identify what the appropriate ratios for mental health provider per student are. But what it does not do, and what a problem that we need to continue to target, is making sure that we have the workforce to fill these positions, right? And so it's awesome if we're saying this is what we need and here's the money to do it, but if we don't have the people in the schools to do the work, we're right back at square one. And so I see HB 100 and 300 as one piece of the puzzle. I see them helping us to continue to build out our wellness centers. I see us making sure that we have wellness centers in every school, from elementary school all the way up to high school, and making sure that kids have access to those wellness centers. But again, a big part of that is making sure that we have the workforce to fill that. So I mentioned, it partly is because I'm a millennial and partly is because I'm just angry about all my student loans, but I'm very vocal about the amount of student loan debt that I have in comparison to making $17 an hour with a master's degree and all that student loan debt. And so I always bring it up jokingly and lightheartedly, but it really is a serious problem. We can't expect people to be working with the most sensitive parts of us, our minds, and their minds aren't okay because they don't have the funds and the resources to sustain their own families. So they're at work stressed out, right? And so I'm also a staunch advocate for making sure that we're creating opportunities for student loan repayment, that we are working with Del State and UD to have strong social work programs that will keep our students here and keep our young people here. And so that was a long tangent of basically saying that I think that our mental health services will start with our young people, but the work that we're doing will also impact how we have our employment and economic opportunities for the people that we want to be doing this work in the state.
Excellent. And I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge the fact that, the General Assembly has done so much to support academic programs like Delaware State University, making sure that higher education is accessible to our Delaware students through the Inspire Scholarship. And we just love seeing our students, progress into our social work program and then give back to the community that has given so much to it. So thank you in that regard. So you mentioned using ratios to determine the number of mental health practitioners you need in the schools. Is there any data being collected about the execution on these bills and the effectiveness in schools?
Yeah, it's wonderful that you asked that. We actually just passed a resolution, a House concurrent resolution that started in the House and passed the House, and we passed it in the Senate yesterday, that will ask our schools to give us the data around this. So how many positions have they been able to fill? How many are still open? How many positions are posted? And so, unafraid to say that was something that we should have included in the bill, but we are making sure that we go back and ask the schools for regular updates so we know how far we've come and how far we still need to go around that, because data collection is really important.
Absolutely. And I'll circle back to police. So the General Assembly recently honored Newcastle County PD's behavioral health unit for their work regarding mental health services. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so it was essentially what my colleague Senator Poore was mentioning earlier. As she was speaking, I was laughing to myself because her district borders mine. She's the 12th, I'm the 13th, so we're right next door to each other. And she also, you mentioned in her bio that she grew up in Jefferson Farms, and I grew up right around the corner from her in Swanwick Estates. So I've been following in her footsteps for what feels like my entire life, apparently. And so in talking about this, it's very similar to what she was mentioning earlier. So after that unit was formed, when I came into office in 2020, I was very interested in mental health and healthcare and wellness all in all. But I was also made chair of corrections and public safety. I am sorry for him. And so I was interested in how we marry those things, right? How we marry police work and mental health. And so I did a ride along with Newcastle County's behavioral health unit, and I got to see them in action. Interestingly enough, it was the same night last year that that a tornado happened. So I didn't get to stay with them as long as I was supposed to, because they were like, okay, there's a tornado, you got to go now. But it was really interesting to ride side by side with them and the social workers, most of who work for Christiana Care. So they're a contract that they have with Christiana to have those behavioral health specialists do the ride-alongs. And you know, one thing I'll say about social workers is we are fearless, right? Like we want to know what's going on with our clients. We want to know how we help. We're not afraid to roll up our sleeves. You mentioned me working at Christiana Care, and when, you know, I always would have my colleagues laughing at me because when there was a crisis in the ICU where I worked, well, you knew that something was going on because the first thing I did was like throw off my jacket, which thinking back now was like very dramatic, but it was just like, this is in the way, it's hot, I have to go. And so when I was doing this ride along with them, I would see them doing similar things, right? Like we only got to go to a couple of houses before the storm got bad, but it was pouring rain, it was thundering and lightning, and that didn't matter. Like they had clients that they needed to check on. And so we would pull over in front of people's houses. The officer would stand back. It would be the social worker running to the door, talking with clients. Sometimes the clients weren't even in crisis. It was just a regular checkup. So they know that I'm not only coming here when you're in trouble. Like I'm genuinely here as a person that wants to have a relationship with you and wants to make sure that you're okay. And so what I would have expected at times would be kind of a scary feeling for someone to have a police officer show up at the door, a police car show up at the door. Oftentimes these social workers were greeted with smiles, like, hey, it's good to see you again. Like, you know, and so that I think was just so interesting to see that Newcastle County has really put the work in to be able to cultivate these relationships, because these are clients that, like I said, they're seeing regularly. These are people that they know by first name, they know as soon as they see them. And so you actually really have rapport built here so that if something does happen, if someone does go into crisis, they have a familiar face that then responds to them. And so the names of the people that they work with are cataloged so that unit is the unit that responds to that household if an incident happens at that household. And so it's very intricate work, it's very important work, and it's not easy. And so I think that it's important for us to recognize that we are asking social workers who are not trained peacekeepers, right? Well, we're trained peacekeepers, but not in the way that officers are. We are trained in de-escalation tactics that are vital, but we're not trained in the same way officers are. But there is a value recognized that is added when a social worker is the one that shows up to the door. And so what we want to do is just honor the importance of that work and how life-saving it really can be.
Sure. Any thoughts come to mind about corrections and the mental health work that we'll see forthcoming in that regard?
Yes, thank you for asking that. So Representative Minor Brown, a good friend of mine, actually just passed a bill through the House today that will be coming over, and it is the expansion of postpartum Medicaid. And so that one I think is particularly important. Actually, sorry, that's not the one I meant to mention, but since I started on that one, I'll finish it and then go back to the corrections one. But the postpartum Medicaid is a really important bill because what we see right now in Delaware is that when a woman is eligible for Medicaid because she's pregnant, she's then kicked off that Medicaid 60 days postpartum. But we know that complications from pregnancy can occur within 1 year postpartum. And so this bill expands access to Medicaid for those mothers 1 year postpartum. So if postpartum depression creeps in, moms have access to mental health services that can be life-saving in those situations. But that was not the bill that I meant to mention because you asked about corrections. Another bill that Rep. Minor Brown is working on is a shackling bill for pregnant women in the hospital, or for pregnant women in corrections. Right now, and this was born out of a passion for her because she was told of a story of a person that was incarcerated that was 36 or 38 weeks pregnant and was being shackled. So hands, feet, metal waistband around her. And so right now, Rep. Minor Brown and I are working on a bill that will disallow the shackling of pregnant women, because think about what that does to your mental health, right? It's already frustrating and upsetting enough as a mom that you are in prison while you're with child, right? There's already guilt and shame and stigma that's going to be following you and that you're going to internalize. And so that is reinforced by having to be shackled when you're waddling down the hallway. What are you going to do at 36, 38 weeks pregnant? And so I think that's a really important bill that we are working on. In February, I hosted the State of State Corrections Summit, and it was a 2-day summit, 8 hours each day, back to back, which looking back now on the other side was just not incredibly smart. We forgot to schedule bathroom breaks and all kinds of stuff in that 8 hours, but we were making it work. But we had back to back just kind of sessions talking about everything that was going on in corrections in the state of Delaware. And if you speak to anyone that attended that summit, they will tell you that the most powerful part of that summit was what I lovingly referred to as the shut up and listen session. And so it's where all of us people with important titles had to be quiet and just listen to the voices of people who were in prison and what those experiences were like. And overwhelmingly, every single one of those people, and there were 8 of them on the call, every single one of them at some point mentioned that all they want is to have their humanity respected while they were in prison. And they felt like because they were prisoners, their humanity did not matter to anyone. It did not matter that they were people. It did not matter that they were someone's son or daughter or mother or father or brother or sister. All they were was an inmate. And that is what they felt like. And so that conversation frequently led to their mental health and the depression and the anxiety and the anger and the rage and the resentment that they were feeling. And so I think that one of the conversations that we need to always be having is how being in prison impacts your mental health. After the summit, we're continued to work with the Department of Corrections, and to their credit, they do have access to mental health services in prison, but there's always more that we can be doing, and there's always more that we should be doing. And so I'm working on a bill right now. It's filed Senate Bill 150 that creates the Office of the Ombudsperson that oversees the Department of Corrections. So if someone has a complaint or a grievance about how they have been treated in prison, there is an office that they can go to file that grievance. And the important thing about this bill is that this office is not held under the Department of Corrections. This is held under the DOJ, who is not associated with Department of Corrections. And so it can give a person that's in prison a peace of mind that this is an unbiased person that's going to look into their issue. A lot of times corrections can kind of mirror policing in the idea of that, like that blue wall that you don't cross, right? And so removing this office from the Department of Corrections the intention behind that is giving an added layer of saying, like, this is an unbiased person that is here to recognize your humanity and that is here to investigate and see what's going on and to make recommendations on how to make it better.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. And, just listening to both senators and your feedback, it's so thoughtful. It really makes what resonated with me today is both of you touching on the importance of communication. And Senator Poore, you mentioned it in the context of, being open to it, building relationships, and that being a strategy to getting the job done. And then Senator Pinkey, you mentioned it in the context of shut up and listen. It's just, what a wonderful way to just strike that balance. And I think that really demonstrates the really excellent representation that we have down at the General Assembly with the two of you there. So at this point, I am going to turn it over to our participants. Kim Collins, I think we have some questions.
Yes, we do. The first question is from Dorothy, and it's: considering the unique needs of individuals on the autism spectrum, has there been discussion with area providers about building their capacity to support the unique needs of individuals with co-occurring autism and mental health diagnoses?
So
Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
You go, Nicole, you want me to go, Nicole?
Senator
That's-
Poore, go ahead. The floor is yours, please.
That's okay. No worries. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to jump right in, but I guess that's my nature. So Dorothy, that's a great question. You know, I would say collectively, we're constantly always talking about mental health and being a mom of a child with disabilities. You know, I feel like I need to do a check-in not only for myself, but my children and also my husband. And so, you know, should we be focusing on particular areas? I think we're still learning. I think that depending on what the person's situation is and what's happening, you know, that's where the focus is at the time. So, but that's a great, you know, I don't know if I thought about breaking it down personally in the disability world outside. And as you hear the phone ringing, that would be my son who learned how to FaceTime during COVID. And so even though we're only a room away from one another, he's FaceTiming me right now. So anyway, I think it's a great question, and it definitely has room for conversation without a doubt.
Senator Pinkey?
The first thing that came to mind for me was the McNesby Act, and how we've been creating and trying to push funding into that. So the McNesby Act essentially is providing access to direct support professionals. And so a lot of times, you know, when families have children with special needs, be it cognitive, be it autism spectrum, be it physical needs, those families will look to direct support professionals for support and care, and to take some of the workload off of the family or to assist the family. And so the first thing that came to mind for me was thinking about the McNesby Act and how we passed that and making sure that families have the funding. But because I'm always critical of us as well, we did not make sure that the funding was there in the way that it was intended to be. And so our hope this year is that we're going to finally come back and do the complete funding of the McNesby Act to make sure that all of the money that is there for the families that will need to utilize that. So that's the first thing that came to mind when I think about it. But like Senator Poore said, I don't know that we've specifically targeted autism more so than we have the idea of families with disabilities as a whole and trying to create access to services in that way.
Yeah. And Marie, if I can just piggyback off of what you were saying, just in regards to the McNesby Act, you know, for those that don't know this, in legislation, it could be one word that changes the trajectory of how something takes place. And it's so devastating when that happens. And I have to be quite honest with you, when that happened in the McNesby Act legislation, we had no clue that it was left to the governor's basically decision on how and when he would fund it. So we're about 4 years into this, that we are still asking for the money for funding. But I'll tell you what, lessons learned. And we all, it's okay that this lesson was learned. We are all super, super strict now on legislation regarding funding and how we're wording it to make sure this doesn't happen again.
Is there anything that the group on the phone can do to support your efforts to get funding?
It's already passed through joint finance. It really actually comes to joint finance today in order for them to pass it through the governor's budget. So we had a great showing today, right, Senator Pinkney, of our A team came down to Legislative Hall. They filled the green with folks to basically say, hey, recognize us, don't forget us. And with this budget getting ready to be voted on, please make sure that our funding is there.
Very nice.
Okay, I see another question from Debbie. What type of mental health professionals are you hoping will be in the wellness centers?
So the way HB 100 and 300 reads, it can be, let me pull up the bill, I'll give you the exact words because I had it up for you. Thought I had it up. So it can be social workers, counselors, school counselors, or licensed clinical social workers. And that is for the mental health or the behavioral health specialist piece. There is also, and that is in a ratio of 250 students per provider, which sounds like a lot. And personally, I think is a lot, but that is our national standards for ratios. And then there is a ratio of 700 students for schools per school psychologist, because psychologists kind of oversee the work of the social workers and school counselors. So there's room for a larger ratio per student pupil to psychologists there. And the wellness centers do more than just mental health too, right? So there's nurses there that provide health. When I had the opportunity to tour Warner Elementary School under the direction of a huge loss to our state, Warner actually had or is creating access to dental care in the school. And so I think we need to be creative in that, right? Like that is an amazing thing, because dental care and you know, my Senator Poore brought up my colleague, Senator McBride, who just passed the bill around streamlining dental care. Dental care can also be life-threatening. And so making sure that our kids have access to dental care is really important. So we can get creative, and we should get creative, because sometimes our schools are the only places where kids have access to wellness care in all of its form. So I think right now those HB 100 and 300 are focused primarily on social workers, school counselors, and psychologists. But I believe that wellness centers can be run the gamut, particularly the Life Health Center does amazing work in this field. And the Life Health Center, they are a wellness center provider. They believe in preventative care, so they don't just wait until a child is showing symptoms or a child is acting out in class. Like they do screenings on every child in the school to see what's going on with them, to see if they need referrals. And so they also help make referrals for social services for families, if social services need if families need food stamps, if they could qualify for TANF. Like the Life Health Center provides assistance and case managers to families to help them through all of those processes. And so I would love to see all wellness centers doing something similar to what Life Health Center is doing.
And Lakresha, if I can just add some perspective to this. So we passed legislation to add the wellness centers into the schools. They are roughly running at the cost of about $250,000 to build it out.
Okay.
That's significant. So I'm sure that will take quite a bit of advocacy with regard to getting the funding to actually follow through.
So we are doing it, unfortunately, piece by piece, but I think, again, this legislative body is committed to making sure that we're providing the resources that our kids need. I know Eisenberg for a period of time, and please don't quote me because I'm not sure it's changed, but you know, they were even having families come in to be able to get some services if needed, which I thought was a great concept. I grew up in Newcastle, and I still actually live in Newcastle, but in Jefferson Farms. And, you know, there was something about the traditional schools, right? Castle Hills, Newcastle Middle. How many people are from Delaware? Let me see a hand raised. Okay, so are you from Newcastle, anyone? 19720?
9720.
Oh, okay. So you know what I'm talking about when I'm saying Castle Hills and Newcastle Middle and William Penn. You know, you walk to school. There's something about having that community setting and being able to have that. And so when our superintendent, Dusty Blakey, put that together at Eisenberg, I thought it was probably one of the best things that we could have seen. And I would love to see other schools mirror that.
Sure.
Just a quick shameless plug that was the Life Health Center.
And I guess it makes you think about how the conversation we oftentimes have, how are we going to invest our dollars, right? Are we going to do it on the front end with our kids early with intervention and support services so that on the back end we aren't, funding prisons and
Exactly.
so.
Okay, just a couple of more questions left.
Okay.
There's a comment from Ebony. I remember hearing about a bill last year called the Mental Health Justice Act.
Yeah,
Not sure if it's on a state or federal level, but it was supposed to be a grant to fund local governments for training and dispatch of mental health professionals. Interested to hear the senator's feedback regarding that bill, pros and cons.
sure. So that was a federal bill. And that was introduced in our through our congressional staff. So that would be something that our Congresswoman Lisa Blunt Rochester would be able to speak to. Because it's on a federal level, I don't have a lot of information in regards to it, but you know what? Delaware will always take money.
We will always take money.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it
Absolutely.
looks- Oh, no, go ahead, Senator Poore.
No, I just was going to say, we have ARPA funds that have come into the state and, that's been a little challenging for us as legislators trying to figure out where the money's going. It did not pass through the legislative body. Those ARPA funds came to the governor, and then the governor set a process up to be able to fund some of the programs. I'm thrilled to know to share, if you don't know, that our kids department did get ARPA funds money. And so they're going to be investing in our mental health services and making sure that we do have a spot for our children to land if there is a crisis event.
And will Delaware police officers receive additional training to adequately work with individuals who have unique needs, particularly in the event that a social worker may not be available to accompany them when needed?
That's a really good question. One point of clarity too on the behavioral health unit. That behavioral health unit right now, the one that I'm speaking of is only under Newcastle County Police. So there are efforts and there are other police departments that have similar units. But one thing to note is that in Delaware, we have, in little tiny Delaware, we have over 48 different police departments all throughout our state. So not every one of those has the behavioral health unit. And so, there are some that are creating it, but we're encouraging the continued addition of that for as many units as possible. Now note, some of those units are just like one sheriff makes up the whole entire unit. So not all of them will have the capacity or the manpower to do that. But it is important to note that. And then so at that particular unit at Newcastle County Police it's like a team of maybe 6 people, and half of those are officers and half of those are mental health or behavioral health specialists. So this is not a giant unit. So that unit, yes, they have special training, but not all officers have that same training as the behavioral health unit. In their probably not the right term, but I'm just going to say, like, in their officer cadet school, they do receive like training, but I wouldn't say that it is continuous. They do regular upgraded trainings, but there's always, in my opinion, room for them to receive more training around that. Right now, we don't have in state law what officers need to receive for training. There's a bill out right now, and I think it's in the House, from the speaker, that would create or make some changes to the unit that oversees kind of police, can't think of the right word, but kind of they kind of dictate what police need to do. And so this bill will charge this same body with coming up with the training and how officers need to react in certain situations. And so that is something that maybe in that bill can be discussed, but I don't believe that it's in there now. So the long-winded way of the answer to that is that there's opportunity for us to continue to discuss that, but it's not set in stone anywhere right now. I do want to put a plug out for a bill that Senator Sturgeon is working on, and I'm working on with her, for student resource officers, which are the police officers that are in our schools. So I saw in the comments that a few of you are educators or work in the education space. And so some of you may be familiar with student resource officers, which was a very interesting hot button topic last year. We saw a couple of schools come out with this, where their school boards come out and try to get rid of SROs. It's a hot button topic that a lot of people like to have, but not everyone is ready for the removal of SROs. And there are some schools and some families that feel like they're added value. And so the bill that I'm working on with Senator Sturgeon would actually require increased training for SROs. So right now, any officer can just kind of go and become an SRO. There's not really a lot of stipulation around it, but Senator Poore talked about earlier how important our children are, right? And so we need to be making sure that we have an understanding of who is working in our schools, even those officers, so that it's not just an officer that is ready to retire and wants what could seem like a cushy job at a school being a student resource officer. So this bill is going to require training on adolescent mental health and substance abuse. It's going to require training around LGBTQIA+ youth, training around like behavioral health, bias, implicit bias, and all of the kind of those different things. And so we are targeting the education that officers receive in that specific aspect, but that's like a minuscule number of the officers that are out on our streets. And so I think there's always room for continued conversation around the training that they receive. But we don't have anything in state law right now that mandates that.
Right. And if I can just add to that, you know, we keep talking about our children, but let us not be neglectful of each and every one of us, right? So in my full-time job, I actually partnered with Christiana Care to ask them about sensitivity training. And the reason why I wanted to do that was for my staff and for the folks that I work with on a daily basis. So they have a great program that it's what's the talk around the water cooler. And so this is something to be able to do a check-in for each one of us to make sure that we're doing okay. And if we're doing okay, then we will be able to promote good health to our kids. So remember, it's kind of like when you're in the airplane and they say to you, when the oxygen mask drops down, you got to put it on yourself first, and then you can go help the person next to you. And this would be the same philosophy that we should all take in. I think we are, I'm looking at the group of ladies here. We're all strong women. We are all finding something in our lives that make us get up every single day, whether we like it or not. And if that's the case, we have to take stock and value of who we are first to be able to then help our kids.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you both for your participation today. Of course, your comments were incredibly thoughtful and informative for our group. So Kim, who is closing us out this evening?
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for participating. We will have a survey in the chat that will be placed in the chat. And while that's being placed in the chat and you're completing the survey, again, I just want to say thank you. Thank you to everyone for coming out and just being with us and talking about mental health and talking about the House bills. Like you said, Senator Pinkey, there's a lot going on in the chat with people thinking you're doing a great job and that the House bills are great for both of you, talking about, like you said, the educators. So we're very happy that this was a great conversation. Right now, oh, thank you for, yes, please feel free to put your contact information in the chat. That would be great. Okay. Is the survey in the chat?